Welcome to Introduction to Game Development. This is Computer Science 303 at Missouri State University. My name is Matthew again, and I'll be showing you how to use UDK. And as always, I will preface the video with my disclaimer that I am not an expert. Now, today's video will be over static meshes. But before we begin, let's go ahead and make sure that we have the most recent version of our map in our content folder for our UDK install. So let's go to wherever you've saved your map. In this case, I just have mine on the desktop. So I have Lab 4. I'll go ahead and copy it. And then in my contents folder, I come in and we'll paste it. Copy and replace. So now I know I have the most recent version of our map ready to go in UDK, and I'll go ahead and open up. Now, last time we focused on materials, which we were using to paint the surfaces of our BSP brushes. Today, we're going to be going over static meshes. Now, static meshes are generally going to be processed faster by the computer than BSP geometry. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule, but in general, the static meshes are just going to be instanced by the hardware across the entire level wherever they're used. And in many cases, it would be largely irrelevant whether you used BSP or static meshes, in particular if you're just doing something simple, but it becomes impractical to do everything with BSP brushes. So the real advantage is likely on the art and design side of the equation, because constructing complex objects with good UV mapping, it just takes a really long time to do with BSP brushes. And in the case of making simple objects, basic walls, basic flooring, it's perfectly fine, but once you start getting into complex shapes, it's just not very smart to even attempt to try using BSP anymore, even before the performance argument takes effect, just because of how long it takes to actually create the content itself. So let's go ahead and open our map. So here we go to Lab 4. And so here we are from where we left off last time, where we had painted the surfaces of our BSP geometry. And so now to learn a little bit more about static meshes, let's go ahead and open up the content browser. Now, in the content browser, we looked at a few things last time for accessing materials. But in general here we have all our different packages in the bottom left corner, and under object type, last time we filtered it for materials, but this time we can go ahead and filter it by static meshes. There it is. And we don't see anything right away, but if we just go up and selecting different packages here, I need to clear my search filter as well. So if we just went to different packages here, we'd see that there are a number of different static meshes available in each, or at least in some of them. And we can always select all assets, and if you're just not familiar with what static meshes are available to you, then filtering by static mesh and choosing all assets, you'll be able to browse through everything available. Now, some of these do not have collision maps, and in most cases it will warn you, saying no collision across the bottom of it. See if we can find one here. But here's some no collision models here, where if you added them into the level, you would be able to see them, but as well you'd be able to walk through them. So they're not necessarily ideal for any place that your player character might be able to reach. And let's go ahead and just search one so we can talk about how you might add them to the level. So let's see here. Let's go ahead and search for deco storage. So here's some storage tanks that I might be able to use here, and let's go ahead and one way to add them is to simply drag and drop it. And now that it's in there, you can do all of the things that you would normally do with objects in order to shape or resize them in that, to move or resize them. So with the widget we can move it up or down, left or right, back and forth. And as well, if you go ahead and press space, you're able to scale the size of it. And we're able to do this non-uniformly as well. So if you select your non-uniform scaling up here, you can choose to expand it out in different directions as you like. Now, in addition to using our non-uniform scaling widget, we also have these options down here on the bottom, where we have draw scale 3DX, draw scale 3DY, draw scale 3DZ. Now we can resize this however we like by doing a uniform scaling in this first field. So say we wanted it twice as large. So now it's twice the size as it was. I'm going to take that back down to 1. And we can do our non-uniform scaling also just by manipulating the individual fields here. So for instance, we have it set to be kind of fat right now. Let's make it a little bit thinner. Say 1.8 for instance. And so there's two different ways that we can perform non-uniform scaling. Now, some other options here for how we might position our static meshes. I'll go ahead and press space here so I can get my transformation widget again. And say, so for instance, maybe we added our static mesh and it's up off the ground, and we want to make sure it pins to the ground. If you press the end key, that will automatically move it downward until it hits a collidable surface. So if you want to pin something to the ground, one of your static meshes to the ground, then just simply have it selected and press the end key. Now I'll go ahead and move our static mesh over into our room here. And having it over here, let's go ahead and rotate it around. Get the control panel open on this side. Just a little more rotation. There we go. And let's pin it up to the wall here. And so now that we have it against the wall, now there's a number of other ways that we might be able to add static meshes to the level. Another way, besides just dragging and dropping it from the content browser, would be to make sure you have one selected. Let's go ahead and choose from over here. If we select this single storage tank here, and while we have it selected, now anywhere that we are looking at our map, we can hold down the S key and press left click. And that did not work. One moment. Okay, now there it worked, and it just took a moment while I was recording the video here. That's maybe not the ideal way to place a static mesh though, as holding the S key also moves you, so you're essentially moving your point of view at the same time that you're adding the static mesh, which can be messy at times. So I would definitely recommend dragging and dropping it from the content browser, at least to get the initial version of it. And another option you have, if you want to copy a static mesh as you've already scaled it, then if you go ahead and select the static mesh, hold down the Alt key, and then simply drag it. It's taking just a moment here. Now if we simply drag it while holding the Alt key, and it takes just a moment while I'm recording the video for it to work. But if you just be patient for it to occur, then it will go ahead and create a copy of the static mesh. There we go. So here's a copy of the static mesh. So it would be as if you were normally moving it, but while you're holding Alt, it automatically creates a copy of it. And now that I actually have a copy, I can let go of the Alt key and just move it around. And say maybe we want another one on the other side. And we're just waiting for it to respond. Now you should not be normally having this kind of trouble getting the copy to occur. I'll go ahead and leave it as is for now. While I'm doing the video, though, the computer stalls a little bit whenever I try to use some of these hotkeys. And so if you're having trouble with it in class, I can demonstrate it there as well. Now, something else we might do is we can use a combination of static meshes together for a nice effect. So say, for instance, we wanted to make a window here. And I'm going to go ahead and change this material on the interior of this wall here. So opening my content browser. Here we are. And so let's go ahead and choose more of a basic pattern here that's not made of brick, so we don't have to worry about lining up with the mortar on that brick material. Let's go to, say, concrete. And make sure we unfilter static meshes and go to materials. And so here we have the concrete material that we've used in the past. I'll go ahead and just drag it over. So now we have a concrete wall here. And we can go ahead and remove a little section of this. Say, let's take two little sections here by going to our brush. We're going to do some subtractive brushes on the wall over here. So now that we have our brush selected, we'll move it up a little bit, and I'll go ahead and change our view here. So now we go to brush, and we'll move it up a little bit, and over a little bit, down a little bit. We'll go ahead and rescale it down. And let's say, for instance, let's do a non-uniform scale, make it a little bit taller. Actually, we'll make it, there we go. Let's make this maybe half that size, down a little bit. So here's a nice little window size we might be able to use. And I'll move it down a little bit so that it's around eye level. So you can see here's our size reference model. And here's our brush. Now, I'll go ahead and move it over now to match with the wall. And let's go ahead and get the intersection on that wall. And we'll say Control S to remove that little bit of the wall to get the window made. And we'll drag it over here as well. And I'll back up here so we can make sure we're aligned properly. So Control S again to subtract that part of the wall. So now we have two little windows that we've made, and we can do a combination of static meshes to make that look rather nice. So let's make sure we've got an interior. So okay, it's already patterned that interior with the concrete material that was used on the interior of the wall. And let's go ahead and get our brush out of the way here. Open our content browser, and deselecting materials, let's go to static meshes again. And we'll say all assets, and we'll go to our search field, and let's say glass. So here is a no collision glass model. We can go ahead and drag and drop it in. So now let's pull this up, and that does not appear to be the right shape that we need. I'll go ahead and delete it, and let's look for the other one. So if we just go to the search window and type window, we'll go ahead and add this glass right here. It's the S_HU_deck_SM_F window_glass. We'll drag that out. And as well, let's go ahead and drag out this window frame right here, right beside it. So there's the combination of the glass and the window. And now let's go ahead and fit these to our window. So if we go to non-uniform scaling up here, we can bring that to be a little bit smaller. And let's go ahead and position it into our wall here, so into our window area here that we've made, so that we know it's the right size we want. And don't worry about hiding static meshes inside the wall or anything like that. It's not going to be a problem. So you can achieve some unconventional uses of your static meshes by perhaps hiding sections of them inside the geometry of your level. So here's the frame of our window. And let's make sure we get it lined up just right. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in over here on our view. And back to non-uniform scaling. Let's bring it down a little bit. Getting it to fit just right. And we'll make the whole thing just slightly larger. So there's the frame of our window. Let's go ahead and select our sheet of glass that we had earlier. And notice, since the glass doesn't have collision, you can't necessarily select it right away, but if you go ahead and go to Brush Wireframe, makes it a little bit easier to see everything. So there's our glass, and we can go ahead and fit it as well to the level, or to the window that we've created. And we'll go ahead and do non-uniform scaling for this as well. Bringing it to size. And again, it doesn't really matter if we leave an edge of it sticking out. So now we'll bring this up to the window, along with our frame here. So now if we go back to our lit mode, we can see we have a window there. Let's make sure we can get that pane of glass just a little more hidden in the wall there. Go back to that wireframe view. There's our pane of glass, and let's make sure we got it all hidden in there. Now let's go ahead and look at the lit view. So there's a good start to it. There's our window. We can see it on both sides. And we've got it nicely fit to that window. We know the other window is the same size. So while holding Control, we'll select the other static mesh as well. So we know we have it because it says down here, it says 2 actors selected. So we've got both of them. And if we want to go ahead and add it over to the other one, we can just, since we have them both selected, hold down the Alt key and drag it over. And of course I'm having trouble while creating the video here. And so there it is. Okay, so now it's popped up. I have them both selected. Or I thought I did. Oh, I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, there we go. So there I have both of them selected. And we'll go ahead. Unselect that. Get both the frame and the window. I'll go to the wireframe view again just so I can see that window a little bit better. The glass, rather. And now that I have them both selected properly, I can go ahead and just drag it over to fit into our other window. It looks like we got a nice start there. So there's our window, and there's our other window. So now we have a basic idea of how to search for static meshes, how to place them in the level, how to select multiple static meshes at the same time to copy them by alt-dragging them. As well, we have the option to place them in the world by holding S and clicking, though that's maybe not the recommended way. And of course you could always just simply select it and copy and paste as well. But now that we know how to put static meshes in there, a good thing to point out is, and we haven't really encountered this yet, but in the future we'll be able to make objects move around in the game. And while we're able to do this with static meshes, we're not able to do it with brushes. So if the object that you want to be able to make move in the future, whether it be like an elevator platform or really anything, doorways, it doesn't matter, it will have to be done with a static mesh, and if you don't have it available in the content browser already, then you might have to make your own static meshes. Now mostly static meshes will be coming from another software like 3ds Max or Maya or Blender or whatever. But since we're not going to be using that software in this course, it's probably a good idea to cover how to convert a BSP brush into a static mesh. And so, don't worry, it's not very hard. Let's go ahead and just create a brush here. So where's our brush now? Here's our brush. So with our brush here, let's just choose a regular basic block. So with our basic block shape here, and let's go ahead and drag it over. So dragging it over, we'll just go ahead and drop the block maybe over in the corner of our area here on our platform. Sorry about that, I was interrupted at my door. So now, go back to our brush. So here's our brush on the inside here. Bring it up a little bit. So now we get it up to normal height, and we'll bring it out here, and let's go ahead and make it a little bit smaller. Just making it a little bit smaller. So now, as we have it here, and now we'll go to brush so we can see it in all of our windows. So here it is, just a basic cube, and we'll go ahead and Control A to add it to the level. And maybe we can go ahead and also color it with some materials. So deselect static meshes, go back to materials, and we can search for whatever. We can make this a goo non-trans material here. So let's go ahead and just add it in there. And we'll go ahead and right click, or alt right click, alt left click to add it to the other surfaces. Okay, so we've added it there. So now go to the brush wireframe view so we can make sure we have the whole thing selected, and let's make sure we get the brush out of the way. Not the additive brush we just put in, but rather the brush tool there. So now we have the actual brush selected, and while it's selected, we go ahead and right click, make sure we get this right. So right click it, and we want to say to convert, and then convert to static mesh. And a little window will pop up. It'll ask you which package you want to save it in, so I'll just save it in my package. And then under grouping, we'll go ahead and make this meshes. and we'll just leave the name as MyMesh. So we'll say OK. And now if we go to our content browser and let's go ahead and deselect materials, all let's say MyMesh, all assets. So here's our mesh that we just created out of that brush, and you'll notice it says no collision model. So let's go ahead and double click it, and let's go ahead and add collision here with our static mesh editor. Now if you go up to the top here, it says collision, and we'll do 6 DOP simplified collision. You can try with other kinds of collision on other kinds of brushes, but the more complex the shape is, the less likely you're going to be able to find a collision map that will work with it. For instance, if you do like a spiral staircase, there are just so many surfaces on there that it just won't know what to do in terms of how to wrap collision boxes around it. And so really the best option is still to use 3ds Max or something like that to actually have a complex collision map created by the artist for the object. But we'll go ahead and do this for now with a simple cube. It shouldn't be a problem. And we'll go ahead and say yes. So now we'll close it, and you'll notice no longer on the bottom does it say no collision. And now, so if we go back to our unlit mode, or actually while we're looking at this brush, let's go ahead and delete the brush itself, because we don't actually need it now, because we can instead go ahead and just use the static mesh. So I'll go back here. It's still there until we rebuild the geometry. But let's go ahead and just drag this static mesh out. This is the new static mesh that we've created. And it didn't know where our pivot point was supposed to be, so we'll go ahead and drag it up. And I'll go ahead and close this now. And we'll build all. That'll get rid of our extra brush here that we used to create our static mesh. And I'll pause this while it's working. So now we've rebuilt the level. I'll go ahead and close our map check here. And don't worry about it if it says object has overlapping UVs. That's not really an issue that we can fix in UDK. It's not going to cause major problems for these simple shapes. On more complex static meshes though, it's a bigger deal in that it will cause artifacting light or performance issues. And so if you see this warning coming from static meshes that you receive from your artist, then you need to give them that warning that the UV maps are overlapping. So we'll go ahead and close this. And just to see what's going on here, playing in the editor, here's our new static mesh. You try to walk into it, we can't because of course we added our collision to it. And we have our windows here. You can see that there's the glass that's distorting the image through the window. We have the frame as well. And you can walk in, and here are the extra static meshes we added. That single tank that we added earlier by holding S and just simply clicking. The first static mesh that we brought in, and then this one that we alt and dragged to copy. And so we have a number of static meshes here right now, and everything's working exactly like you might expect it to. Now, the last part of this tutorial, let's go ahead and cover real quickly how to import a static mesh. So if an artist were to actually create a static mesh in some other software for you to use, then they would give you a couple files. They would give you, in particular, you'll have the objects, which are .ase files, and then you'll also have the texture, which is the same thing that we used to create the material last time. So in order to do this though, let's go back to our content browser, and while we're in our Lab 3 package here, we'll go ahead and say import. And so first let's go ahead and import the static mesh itself. So I have mine on the desktop in a folder called Andy's content. So I go to object, and let's import this woodcrate.ase. So we'll open that, and it'll ask which package we want it in or whatever, and grouping, we'll say meshes, and the name is woodcrate, and we'll leave it as is. So OK. Now this warning will appear sometimes. It says generated imported vertex count ratio exceeds expected percentage. You will almost always see this message on simple shapes like cubes, but you don't want to see it on really complex static meshes. So don't worry about it if it's a simple object that you're importing. But if you see it on something with a lot of polygons, like a statue or anything like that, then make sure you warn your artist, because they're using far too many polygons in that case. So we'll go ahead and say OK. And notice it's just a box. It doesn't have anything special going on there. Double click it, it's just this right here. And it's not exactly what our artist intended, right? It's just the shape. So we're going to also have to import the texture and the material. So let's go ahead and import the texture and create the material from it. So going back to textures here, this is the same texture that we used in our last video to create a material, but go ahead and do it again now. So we choose this target file, say open, and grouping will be textures. Leave the name as is, say OK. So here's our wood crate texture. Now while it's selected, go ahead and right click, say new material, and we'll call this wood crate material. And OK. And oh, actually, yeah. The grouping here we should change as well to materials. So now OK. So now we have this new material, and just like last time, we need to go ahead and establish which texture is going to be used for the texture sample. So scrolling up here, go to texture sample and drag and drop it. And of course I didn't have it selected, so let's go ahead and go to that texture. So here's our texture we just added. We've selected it now. Go to our texture field down here and hit the green arrow to pull it in from the content browser. Connect it to the diffuse map, and we'll close it and say yes. So now we have that, and we go back to our mesh, and now we want to be able to put that material on that mesh. So let's go ahead and double click the wood crate, and now while it's selected in here, let's see, if we go to LOD info, go down a menu, and then it'll be 0 elements 0, and then in here, let's see, in here we have material equals none, or material none right here. So we'll select that, and let's make sure we get the texture selected, or the material rather. Let's get the wood crate material that we just created from that texture. We have it selected, and we'll pull it in from the content browser using the green arrow button. And so we go ahead and close this. And now when we look at the mesh, there we go. And there's our crate material on that crate static mesh, and we'll go ahead and drag it out there so we can use it. It might take just a moment. Now, while it's having trouble here, I do notice that there is an asterisk here which indicates that it has not been saved yet. So let's go ahead and right click it and save. And there it goes. Okay, so now it's appeared. There's our static mesh. And we'll go ahead and build all. I'll pause it while it's building. And so I'll go ahead and close now. Close. And Oh, and I think I saved my package in the wrong spot. And we will go ahead and fix that in class, but that will conclude our video for today. And next time we will come back to talk about terrain.